Hello and welcome, beautiful people. Today is November 25th, 2025, and we're focused on a digital world town hall meeting. We're grateful for those that are online as well as those that are with us physically, or I should say digitally, all around the world, from Australia to Mexico to New Zealand, as well as Canada. And we may have some folks from Sweden joining us shortly. Thank you for taking the time. We will focus on what's gone on this last week, primarily topics that are material, whether it's development or relationships within the digital world, as well as general questions, and then any kind of detailed review. As we get going, we want to appreciate those that are always here in support, especially those that help to keep the trains on time in the background that just continue to do that. We're grateful for them and for all that they do. Speaking of gratefulness, this actually tomorrow starts a holiday here in the U.S. Called Thanksgiving, and it's personally actually the favorite holiday of the year. Grateful for life and for the simple things, and uh, grateful for you. Grateful for folks that actually come in and pay attention and want to add value within this environment as the digital layer and the digital world become very real. A lot of folks don't understand the transition that's happening, but we live in a dispensation where opportunity abounds. And with that being said, I'd like to just ask our general audience if any would be willing to offer an opening prayer as we get started. Anyone?
I can say a prayer, Michael.
Thanks, Becca. Go ahead.
Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, Mother God, Creator and Sustainer of all things, we thank you for the gift of this moment, for bringing us together here today, and for every person joining us in this space, whether they are listening online or in the near future. We open our hearts to you now. May we be receptive to the high guidance today that dwells within us, that deep inner knowing that you have planted within each of us. Thank you for the gifts that you have given us all of gentleness, love, kindness, and compassion, wisdom, and generosity. And in this stillness, we rest in your presence, knowing that you are the Prince of Peace, knowing a love like no other. Remind us to accept ourselves, even when it is hard to accept ourselves. Thank you for giving us the ability to discern right from wrong and to speak up and use our voice when we need to. Today, I pray for our governments all around the world. Please guide them with wisdom, integrity, and humility. I pray for our police forces, our military, our Navy, our FBI, our CIA, our defense personnel all around the world. Surround them with safety, give them the courage, and let peace bear their path. Help us to understand the pain that comes in forgiveness, so we may listen with the eyes of our hearts. And may you rest your hand upon every leader and every protector of our communities. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. For those that may not be aware, this really is a spiritual battle, and one that takes a lot of faith to understand, because it's easy to understand the concepts of spirits and physical bodies, but sometimes when you're in the transition, it's difficult to see, especially as things change. So grateful for those words and for your continued support over the years. For those that may not be aware, that battle and war is really just with secret combinations that try and control through centralization and systems. It's just that simple. And the goal is to basically bring transparency to these different systems, whether they're public or whether they're private, and to utilize decentralization to actually enable the future where we can have control over our own identity and our own lives. The digital world has really built a framework where it starts with identity, then moves to transactions or finance and storage and communications, assets, endorsements. Endorsements can be by third parties such as states and governances and other environments, but below that is really the individual, not above it, so to speak. So that order is really important. And it's important to find a balance between it. So we'll talk a lot about that. But for those that may be joining us, it's really simple. You basically get 12 words first. In this image, it's 24. And then it actually connects up with a unique identifier that you as an individual own. In some cases, it may be something biological, your finger or your face, if you've already put those into systems. We don't recommend your face, but there's a whole nother conversation on that. But then it uses derived keys from it. The goal is to combine the physical and digital world so that future generations may actually have a fighting chance and are not enslaved, as what's happening will literally enslave them because it controls their identity, then their payments, and then with AI, it will literally enslave the things that they do. We believe that there's a counterbalance to that. And what we're looking at here is an individual that owns their own identity, their own ability to transact or pay or process, and then be able to run their own world. As we wrap up 2025, we're wrapping up the exchange priority. The goal was 5. We hit 7 different exchanges from around the world. And these are not just exchanges that are centralized exchanges, which there's really 3 different categories that this actually replaces. One are crypto exchanges. Crypto exchanges that are centralized like Coinbase or Binance or Kraken. These are environments where your assets are actually in their systems. And that's why things like FTX can actually create such havoc. So the individual owning their own identity, their own data, their own assets on their own chain in their own exchange is what was number 1 priority throughout the 2025 year. Decentralized phones, setting up new phones in new environments. We'll talk a little bit about that today. The next generation will be released in October 2026 is the target. And in homes, we've actually reached over $1 billion in pre-orders and currently in the process of building a factory actually here in Utah. The goal is to build a minimum of 25 new homes per day and then build communities around that. And autos is a whole nother beautiful conversation, but between phones and communication, homes and where we live, and autos and how we transact or how we travel, all doing them in private and having a community where people can actually come together, not just physically, but also digitally. So those are the things that we focused on within 2025, and we're glad to report out on. Could we have done better? I'm sure there's lots that we could have done better, but I think based upon the resources that we had, super, super grateful and proud and happy with 2025. As we go into 2026, it'll primarily be around the adoption of the digital world, primarily on the exchanges and financing sides, converting fiat systems into the digital world. We're excited to be able to turn on marketing opportunities with different life assets and to tell the world about this life environment. And as we wrap out 2025, we'll talk a lot about what that is. First off, giving thanks. Like I said, today is the 25th of 2025, and tomorrow and the rest of the week will basically, well, I guess the world shuts down in the United States, not the rest of the world. But yeah, slowing down and actually giving thanks and appreciating family, loved ones, but ultimately the world. I think it's, I had breakfast with some pretty interesting individuals yesterday, and we talked about the world and people and how we're all one. And if we can just realize that and love one another, it makes things. It's not that life is not enjoyable, because it really is, but it makes things a lot easier, especially for future generations. And I think we all have a responsibility to leave this world a better place than when we came into it. And so I know that the digital world and the folks in it will definitely do that. When we talk about the life environment, we're looking at it long term, 1,000 years. So all the way till 3025 is really the goal and the target, and to build systems that will actually sustain until then. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about what we call the SETI program, also tied to Utah Life Pilot within Utah. That's one of the biggest material advancements that we're currently focused on, with a primary focus around legislation. And when I say legislation, I'm talking about a lot of different elements. And what I mean by that is, um, from technology to how to roll it out, to how verification works, to how you interface with law enforcement, to how storage works, to how standards work, to how implementations can actually be afforded and realized, to how zero knowledge proof can actually be layered on the existing digital world systems when data is imported in from other third-party environments, and standards that would actually go along with that, to how legal proceedings can actually come from a process where the individual can request their data from centralized service providers. When I say centralized service providers, I mean something that looks like this, where you actually have a lot of different organizations that we've all put our data in over the years, but particularly working with Utah and what they call the Digital Choice Act. These source data providers can actually be receiving a request from the individual for their data in a certain format, and how that actually ties into the state endorsed digital identity system. Very important, very key. So there's lots of details that tie to all of this. There's a ton, whether it's how children can actually tie to it, how ambassadors can tie to it, how genealogy ties to it, to how the universal genealogical standard ties to it. So how folks can actually get involved and be a part of it, to how next generation youth can actually drive their own future by not only learning about this, but actually paying for education through being a part of it. And as they're actually learning and educating themselves, they can actually be a part of the solution in the adoption process, to how protocols can be used, to how connections between different types of protocols, whether it's WC3 or CARI or DIF, which is a Decentralized Identity Foundation, or how all of it can basically come together in such a way where there's not conflict and chaos, but where there can be clarity and understanding. Because there's got to be clarity and understanding so that the next generation can pick this up. That's one of the reasons we do these weekly meetings, where it's streamed real time all around the world, multiple different channels. By the way, I actually got notice today that on the Facebook channel, they will actually delete all the videos that we've done for almost the last 5 years. It's just gone. So think about that. How does everyone feel when it's, on one hand, our identity is basically being profiled and used against us, but on the other hand, when we want data and genealogical artifacts to remain, they just delete it. Why? Because we are actually choosing through convenience to be in their playground. And if we do that, then we're playing by their rules. Most of you that have an iPhone don't even understand that you don't own the phone, let alone the data on the phone or the applications on the phone or your data in their systems. Let me say that again. Your data, your emails, your contacts, your calendar, your messaging, your texts, all of it is inside of their system. It's not yours. You choose to put it in their system. Many of you say, well, we're starting to figure out what this digital ID is and how we don't want to be a part of it. Well, there's a process that we'll have to go through to actually remove ourselves from the centralized systems and actually take the data back. Yes, ClearPhones are one of the changes where you can actually move from Apple or Google into a parallel system where you can own your own data, but there really is 2 steps to being able to do that. So this state-endorsed digital identity framework is something that we're working through with the state. We actually had a meeting with them again yesterday. Wonderful people that are doing their best to try and understand and navigate technology and all the politics and all the vendors. Because just a week before, you had Apple that came in and said, hey, Utah, we really want you inside of our wallet. We want you to be a part of X, Y, and Z. And I'll give you an example. I'll actually show you what they just did and rolled out today with another state, not the state of Utah, but with the state of Illinois. Now, what we're looking at there, I believe, is a centralized system, Apple, that is connecting with a centralized government, the state of Illinois, to basically enslave the individual. And a lot of people may disagree with that, but the triangulation of identity and payments with AI in the future will enable that enslavement. And the goal is to work with the state of Utah to help them to understand how rolling out something similar to that is actually only enslaving citizens. And by enabling the individual to actually own their own identity and data first, so they get 12 words, the 12 words enables them to then have their own identity, which is private, it is permissionless, and then it uses derived keys based upon what's called the carry architecture. And it does key rotation, it does the ability to actually manage keys with derived keys and other things where the individual can actually stay private. Now, there's some zero knowledge proof things that we're working through with how data can be imported into it. But the way that that data is private is imperative for humanity. Like what we just saw with the state of Illinois is not going to help their citizens, but enslave their citizens. And when people start understanding what this is really all about with digital ID, they're going to start saying, well, what's the alternative? What's the solution to this? And that's really what the digital world has helped bring to the world. So those are the things that we've been working on over the last week. Here's a little bit, a couple of the photos in review. So this is actually a gentleman named Jonathan Johnson, who we met with along with, he's actually ran for governor of the state of Utah. Wonderful man. He was actually the CEO of Overstock, and they took Bitcoin back in 2014, literally one of the first vendors that actually took it. A gentleman that I worked with, his name is Carl. He actually told his partner, who's another wonderful gentleman, Patrick Burns, about Bitcoin long ago. And then, it basically, this team within Overstock was one of the first organizations to take Bitcoin long ago. And that's really what we're talking about in the future. But think about the next generation Bitcoin, where it's actually real time and transaction and not public. So it can be, the transactions are public, but they cannot be tracked or traced, whereas Bitcoin can, and it's slow. But this individual here, which is a wonderful gentleman, he's actually the chairman of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. His name is Jeff. We had a great opportunity to basically come together and talk about identity for the future. Again, multiple meetings, different perspectives, alignment meetings. We had a couple days in Florida this last week where we actually came together. This is actually a group of folks from around the world. This was actually the keynote speech and the grand finale, which I don't know how I was lucky enough to give the final words, but it worked out that way. And it was a very good event. Supposedly there was over $1 trillion in the room. And the net is these are people that actually care. They care about the future. They care about funds. But a lot of them don't understand that the financial system, namely fiat currencies and stock systems, and even crypto systems, are really have elements of central control. And there's going to be a lot of just different issues in the future. There's some relationships that are being built with different carriers and or providers, which we'll talk a little bit about. I'll let you figure out your own assumptions because it's not public yet. And just some good people that we've been able to start building relationships with and actually becoming a part of the future. Bahrain had a very large presence, along with a lot of other folks from Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates here in the United States. And yeah, so that's kind of the week, as you would put it. These are some wonderful folks from Asia. But this is, and I don't know if there's sicknesses going around in your world, but I thought this was a cute photo. Uh, Self-imposed social distancing. So, but anyways, yeah, so that's basically the week. Wonderful gentleman who I've known for coming up on 20 years, really starting to engage and getting in the middle of things. I'll just leave his name as Craig, but actually the CEO of Clear Holdings, and really engaging and starting to come up to speed and be a part of the future. So grateful for this last week and the time and the safe travels and everything else that kind of tied to it and those that were involved. So with that being said, Mariano, are you in a position to be able to provide a report out on what's going on down in Mexico?
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts while we're transitioning, so to speak? Any questions on what's happened this last week from our audience? Thoughts, observations, anything you're seeing that we may not be touching that you think is material or important?
I was wondering, Michael, if I can chime in. This last week in the United States, and I know this is a global group, but I know the United States has a very large impact on the global economy and what goes on. So we had the Epstein files that are getting released, and that's scary, but also good. I know it's kind of indirectly maybe undermined or foreshadowed what's going on in the digital world as far as how people trust and believe in our financial system. And I was wondering how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, we have digital currencies, we have centralized, decentralized, and then we have this social, I mean, people are social creatures and value is applied according to how people feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they feel like, for example, the Trump coin is garbage, they're going to sell it and dump it, which impacts the cost price, how much you have. What do you see happening in like the digital and clear world being impacted the most by the Epstein files getting released?
Well, I think the digital world is really about creating real assets and real people that actually act in private but controlled by the individual for future generations. And that goes into other systems that really tie to things like what you're seeing down in here in Mexico: identity, health, voting, finance, business, exchange, currency, dispute. There's also another element that ties to transparent and honest news, which you're not seeing here. But, the reality with the Epstein files, it's going to happen whether folks like it or not. And I think it's probably one of those things that'll just be brushed away. I personally, it comes back to the basics of what this is all about. There's secret combinations, and those secret combinations are exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about Epstein, where one would control another and then controls another and then influences another. What's happening with the Epstein environment and with other cultures or other economies or other industries, whether it's oil or transportation or pharma or medical or you name it, they basically all have those same types of circles where we believe that we're above another, or we can control another, or we have a right above another.
You're really cutting out, Michael. You're breaking up.
So, yeah, so I don't know if I'm breaking up for others, but basically I believe that what we're talking about within the digital world is really the core of what the Epstein files are all about. I don't know if there's going to be any more transparency that comes. It's kind of a joke, to be honest with you. I don't know all the details. I don't know whose names are there. I don't know who they're trying to protect. I don't know the details of it. But what I can say is, in the digital world, transparency and honesty will actually bring peace and freedom. And kind of like what Becca said in the prayer, there's an element of forgiveness. I mean, let's say that some crazy names are in there. Who are we to judge them? Who are we to, whether it's the victims or whether it's the perpetrators or whether it's just innocent bystanders, you know, it goes right back to, again, what Becca said in her prayer. Can we actually do the right things to have our own lives in check, our own spiritual environments in check? And that would be my hope. And maybe even as we go through these days of giving thanks, that we can actually find our own peace and find our own strength spiritually, that we can get up and do not only the will of our Creator, whatever that is for everybody. And again, this is not about religion in any form. It's about, connecting and understanding that there is a difference between a spiritual realm and a physical realm and a digital realm, and how we can responsibly roll that digital realm out. But, I don't know. I don't know that I have a solid direct answer around the Epstein files. I do know that I spent some time this last week with an individual that actually went to the Epstein Island and ran around it after he was arrested while he was in prison, before he supposedly either was murdered or disappeared or whatever. And that individual for 6 years has basically been on house arrest with no trial. So think about that. He goes to Epstein's place and runs around it for 20 minutes, videos it, puts it online. Him and all the buddies that were there and a couple others basically all get arrested. And, it's an interesting world. It's an interesting world when you've got people that want to control others. This last week, some of the things that came out was Candace Owens saying, same people that ordered the hit on Charlie ordered a hit on me. And I can tell you that what's crazy is I'm actually sitting in UVU, which is where Charlie was actually killed or shot or whatever you want to believe. Literally just a little bit ways over here, probably 150 feet. It's an interesting life that we all get to live. And that's the key, is we get to. It's an opportunity. What we do with that opportunity every single day is a choice. And I know that the choices every day add up. And hopefully by the end of it, within the digital world, this isn't just some type of a product or some type of a technology or some type of a movement. It's more than that. It's something where generations can look back and say, we actually have this knowledge because of people that intelligently organized it. Like some folks look at a combination of books that they may call scripture, and they think, wow, these things are really important. They have a history and a past to them that we can actually relate to, and we can read these words, and they may be translated, but they mean something as an individual or collectively as a culture. But the goal would be how we can digitally collect data, identities that are intelligently organized. And it's a very different way than the centralized systems. I sat with just Scott Stornetta and Steve and Stuart. Both of those people both Stuart and Scott were mentioned in the Bitcoin white paper. I'm not saying that they're Satoshi. That's not what I'm driving at. But these are people that really understand genealogy, and they understand the ability for different assets to be validated in different ways, whether that's a tombstone or a biography or some type of a timestamp, but how different technologies can come together in our dispensation to actually provide value for future generations. And hopefully there's a day when we look at that and we see the value that systems just like this are providing when it comes to identity and transactions and storage all linked together, that frees the individual instead of enslaving the individual, because digital identity will literally enslave folks. And we talk about the comparisons between the two. But before I jump into this, I just want to wrap up on the Epstein stuff. I don't know. And I personally don't really have a dog in that fight. But I do know that, like Becca said, we need to forgive. We need to not judge. We need to, I look at one of the victims that stood forward, and she was abused in many different ways by the Prince of England. I don't even know his name. And recently, a couple months ago, she took her life. And I look at how all of us actually have a responsibility in that. Yeah, it was her choice, but I think that by just gossip and rumors and media and twisting truths and even just judging others, we put people in a place where they don't feel like they can go on. For instance, there was a gentleman here, his mom actually stood up and said, my son took his own life. There was nothing wrong in his life. He got involved in a photo that he sent to someone over in the Philippines, and they used it against him, and he couldn't deal with it, and he just ended his life. My wish would be that we love one another. We just stop this craziness and we love one another. And I think that the acts against children are just wrong. I think that we need to provide and protect others, but I also think that the power of creation, the power for a man and a woman to come together and create is very beautiful, but it's a tool of Satan's to literally pervert that and turn it into something that's evil. And that's really what has happened here. And when we're talking about control, it's the same type of thing. It is basically just something that is natural, light and dark, choice, right or wrong, and they're all everybody's perspectives. So it's like someone's wrong choice may be someone else's right choice. And I'm not saying that they're justifiable, but I'm saying that we're here on earth to actually have choice. Whether it's right or it's wrong, we're here on earth to have choice. And the consequences that come from that, are lessons that we individually learn. And I guess we can learn from others' choices. At least my foster mother would always try and tell me, Mike, you don't always have to make the wrong choice. You can actually learn from others' mistakes. But I don't know. I hope that the victims can find the peace that they're looking for. And even if that's a form of restitution, so be it. But we have a judiciary system and a legal system that supposedly, if it's going to hold people accountable, let it hold them accountable. If it's not, let there be justice one way or the other. I know it'll happen in this life or the next, but I hope that gives you some level of an answer. I know that, when you tie it to the digital world, it's primarily a technology thing, but does that make sense to you?
It does. And really, it goes back to being responsible and knowing the people in our community. And like the gentleman you referred to, who ended his life, I see being decentralized, as also being connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could there have been something in that case that if he was using a decentralized social platform where he maybe wouldn't have gotten taken advantage of and got to that desperate point?
Well, I think it comes back to even this Jeffrey Epstein topic, but this young man basically had a social platform online on Facebook. And these folks it's actually a call center. It's a full-blown call center. It's not like it's one individual. It's a call center where they actually are doing this as a business. They get this young man to believe that there's a wonderful individual on the other side of things, ties it to a sexual encounter, convinces him to do things that are inappropriate, and takes a photo of it. And then they parallel up the contacts that they have on Facebook and screenshot them, take names, and then basically just go through a process of extortion. And, the net is we live in a transparent world today, but in the future, imagine if we could actually go through and say, these are all the different accounts that I have. And within these different accounts, I'm going to push a button and say, find all my accounts, find the usernames to my accounts, send out an automated letter to all of the different companies that hold my account and my data. And through one of the acts, particularly the act within what's called the Digital Choice Act in the state of Utah, was passed this last 2025 year, provide the data request through a consent request that basically requests all this data back to the individual. And with that being said, there is an accountability process that ties to it. But what if everyone on this call and everyone that's listening to this was able to actually push that button, and in so pushing that button started a process to send out notices to these different platforms. And if the different platforms within a period of time didn't respond, another notice would go out, and then a class action lawsuit could actually start where people could actually scan and say, I want to be a part of this because my data wasn't actually provided back to me. It's a similar thing that happened with GDPR within the European Union, where the European Union provided notice, just like the state of Utah, and said, the people that are in this jurisdiction deserve this right. And if you don't uphold this right, this is your financial liability. And within the first year, Facebook had to pay $5 billion for violating that right. And so what I'm specifically talking about is, imagine if someone could actually move away from the centralized systems to their own decentralized systems, but they need storage that's based around it. And that's where the digital world can come into play, is to provide that storage and that format. When I say format, I'm talking about these types of storage protocols that I'm talking about here, where an individual can actually say, send me this data within a particular format and protocol to this account. And the individual can actually have that data and that information. And then they can prove who they are. They can validate who they are. They can have third parties like states endorse who they are. They can get third-party service providers to verify who they are. But they can actually be in control of their own identity and their own data. Now, I know it's been a long time since we've been talking about this, well over a decade, that particular use case. But I'm convinced that this isn't just some short-term race. This isn't just some, throw a product out. Here's decentralized email. Here's decentralized phones. Here's decentralized account. No, it's so much bigger than that. It's a lifetime of how we can intelligently come together as humanity and actually build a system that's better for the future, that could actually be adopted for long term. So when we're talking about long term, that 1,000 years per se. So that's really what I think we need to be focused on, is how can a system actually help a gentleman like this young man who took his life versus, and even the victim. Like if you look at, turn the table to the Jeffrey Epstein question, the victims are killing themselves now. So they tried to find peace and solace in coming forward and being transparent, but really it tore their life apart, where relationships and identity and even money, things get in the way. And the next thing you know is you've got the the shambles of the children that are involved and the communities and the families that are affected by these things. But I think if we just try and look at them from the big picture, this is life. We're here to learn. We're here to experience. We're here to grow. And just like Becca said, we're here to forgive. We're here to live. And that's why this life endeavor is such a massive thing. Something that actually came about, and it actually came about yesterday morning from this Jeremy or this Jonathan Johnson, who's just a wonderful, wonderful man. But he came up and he says, this life reminds me of 4 words: liberty, identity, freedom, and encoded. So that's what this protocols and the different environment around the technologies encoding really life, and doing it in such a way where the individual owns their own life and their own identity. So with that being said, I hope we can move to a different topic now. Do we have Mariano, are you able to report on what's going on down in Mexico by chance? You still with us, bud? Mariano, are you there, bud? No, looks like we lost him. Dang it. Well, other thoughts or comments or questions or observations? There you
I'm
go.
here. I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead, bud.
Okay,
What's
how's
going
everything
on
so far?
Oh,
Let me just open my.
we're worried about what's going on in Mexico. Can you provide an update at all?
Well, it has been a lot of protest, a lot of revolting, because November the 1st, they killed one of the mayors of Uruapan, Michoacan, Carlos Manso. He was very beloved by all the community. So people are very upset about that because he was like demanding for the government to help him. And the government kind of helped him, but the problem is it's so complicated. So right now, what is happening is there's a lot of more protests. The big one was the November 15. I don't know if you saw the videos, or I don't know if I share you some of the videos
No,
what's happening there.
I did see them.
Yeah, it's amazing, all the movement and mostly the Gen Z, the Generation Z, they're organizing by themselves. Some people thought that they were like being used by another political parties, and some of them were, but they could notice who was who and how they were kind of used, and they just start to organize by themselves. They're organizing in social media, in Minecraft, in Discord, in all these kind of platforms. But the thing is that all that generation is all they wake up,
No.
because I think this is the first generation that they are digital native. They were born in the digital ecosystems. So I think the adoption for any digital platform is just natural for them.
Is there a
Even
way?
for
Is there a way to connect with them more than we already have and help them?
Yeah, actually, I have been working with all of them directly, trying to calm them because they're very upset. They were talking about revolution. This exactly the same that happened in Nepal.
Mhm.
What happened in Nepal?
Mhm.
The Gen Z just overthrow the government there.
That happened
they
in
were
like a week.
exactly.
That was in under a week. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, the circumstances is so much different. What is happening in Mexico, You have the army, but also I call the black army, that is the narco. They are working for the government. It's not that they are being paid; it's that they are the quote unquote the dark army.
Mhm.
So it's very, very complicated in that sense to do something like what happened in Nepal. It will require a lot of more like people to be involved. And what I told them is like the only way is to do voting. To grab enough people, be able to vote by themselves,
Maybe
because some still tell me.
maybe we could change the voting system here from this nebulous voting platform to something that would actually be real, like real candidates, a real timeline, a real call to action.
Yeah.
Maybe think about that over the next little while and see where we end up. Yeah.
What they wanted to do is, first of all, say that I don't know, like it's not impeachment. It will be resignation of not only the president Klaus Sheinbaum, but the whole party. Because what is going to happen in the near future is that we're going to like expose all the corruption in all levels,
Mhm.
but also the judges are working with with the same party, so it's going to be super hard to do it with the national like elements. Perhaps we will need to like use international courts or something like that to be able to, because it's in all the parties. It's not like, okay, just take one and put another. No, so it's not like take out the Republicans and put the Democrats. Like the corruption is in both sides in Mexico, and links with the organized crime. It's so much so deep that it will require like a massive trials, like
Mhm.
international trials to be able to do such thing. And then so first the votes in order to like demand that to the international courts, and then use the voting system to elect like new people, because the government institutions, we're not against that. It works, like but we need to reestablish the democracy. We need to reestablish the republic. It's been, I think, that's kidnapped by traitors. Like I don't see any other way to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It had been kidnapped by traitors and terrorists, because it's not like the organized crime. It's only by themselves. No, it's right now they're in bed, intertwined. They are exactly the same as the government. So
Mhm.
we need to like to take out, like, I will say 70%, 90% of all politicians.
Yeah.
Like it will have to be like super massive effort. And right now the only party is the one with that mayor that was killed, Carlos Manso. I send you the
Yeah.
let me just show it to you very, very, very quick for you to be able to like just show it. Because right now, for example, all the highways and the international, how's it called? Let me just share to you this one. Give me 1 second.
I know that we're not going to have all the solutions for them by
I
any
sent it to
stretch.
you in the chat.
Let's see here. I know we're not going to have all the
No,
solutions
no,
by
just,
any
like,
stretch of
tell you.
imaginations, but
And helping a lot with the voting systems,
mhm. Yeah, voting is one thing that's seamless and it's already built for them. It was built years ago, but I know that this is not something that's going to be easy. But so let's go ahead and look at what you're trying to show us here.
That one is happening right now.
Yeah, so we'll continue to see trade topics and government topics and control topics with not just Mexico, but you're already starting to see it with Canada as well. So, but
Yeah.
thank you for the report out, and let's just keep continuing to see where we can actually possibly add value, or some of these systems that have been built over the years, how they can help them. So, other thoughts?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, bud. Thank you. Other thoughts or comments or topics that anyone wants to discuss or bring up today? Victoria?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Michael. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. So you've been at this for 16 years, and there's a lot that we're not privy to. There's so much going on behind the scenes. What's your gut feeling about the digital world, the vision, and not just the phones or the, like you said, the different products, but I'm talking about the vision. What is your gut feeling? Are people really starting to get it? Do you think we're going to get there? I know this is just a personal question. Don't have to answer, but I'm just wondering.
For probably the last 5 years, maybe 7 years, I was very dismayed and saddened because so many people didn't see it. And, I jumped on a call earlier this morning, and it was a cold call. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know anything. And they pulled up, I just gave them one site, mydigital.life. And they pulled it up and they thought, this is actually the opposite of digital ID. And one, they understand digital ID. And two, they actually understood that it's the opposite of it. Just those two things were massive, because in any kind of, I'm going to pull up a site. I'm going to go adoption. So I'm going to just pull up this chart here. So this is basically what they call an adoption curve. I'll just zoom in on this. And there's an element of people that are basically, actually, this is not a good one. Let's see. Here, this one's a better one. So this early adopters is what you're basically having to teach people about, this early phase right here. And what it tells me is we're actually going to start jumping into this phase of where it's past, hey, this is the problem, and people are going to start looking for the solution. Does that make sense? So for me, it's, very disheartening over the years when I would talk to people about what's coming and how decentralization is such a beautiful, true, and correct principle, but true decentralization, not centralized decentralization. And it was really, now there's a target, it's a target that the world has defined as digital ID. Many people are like, I'm going to do anything to not get involved in it. Other people are literally, it's like the moth to the light. They just continue to go to it, even though they may see, hey, it's going to burn you when you get there and you'll be dead. Is everybody going to die from it? No, but will their spirits and their ability to be free and their ability to have choice be massively impacted? Absolutely. Something that, just like Mariana was talking about, this generation, they're basically are born with technology and a digital environment around them. But for those of us that actually still have another 10, 20, 30, 50 years left, we have to do something. We cannot just sit by and just let the norm be the norm. So that would be the answer is yes, people are actually waking up to it. So does that make sense?
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, Becca.
Yes.
Thanks, Danielle.
Sorry, Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, Becca.
This morning, just for some, clarity for myself, but this morning I was writing about zero trust principles, and I feel like we have, I feel like self-education is the best education I think everyone should take away with today. When we understand zero trust principles and how they actually tie back into the systems that we are building, where does our data really live? How do we log into that system? And what's the BCDR? of your organization. So if organizations and companies can think of their business continuity disaster recovery, I feel like we're in one of the biggest data recovery incidences in history. And what we are doing is reversing the system, because when we think about data as our DNA, we take back the recovery of what we lost. So basically, I'm working on an Operation Run book that teaches me how the back end and the front end work. And for me, I feel like Apple is the back end of how we think it should work. And what we're building is the front end of how we can recover back some of what we've lost.
I can see that. You know, a conversation that I had with the state yesterday was all about the only way for decentralization to truly work is you have to let the individual be the one that actually creates it. And that was a paradigm that was hard when you talk about the back end and Apple, whereas they already own everything. When you get a phone, you can't actually do anything on the phone until you put in a username and an email and authenticate into their system. And once you do that, you're centrally controlled. So how can we take that and flip it so that the individual owns their own identity and you log the centralized systems into their identity? And I think the chief privacy officer was really starting to understand that different paradigm shift. And if we do that, that one thing will actually do exactly what you're talking about and shift it on its head, where the individual can then be in control of their own identity. And then the state endorsements can happen and digital control can take a back seat around controlling the individual. So
Yeah.
other thoughts or comments you want to make, Becca?
Yeah, and when I look deep into the legislation, it looks like if you're not working on your BCDR, I don't know what it is in America, but here in Australia, it's your business continuity disaster recovery. And if you're not working on something like that for your organization, and you are earning over $3 million in your company, and you can't produce that to an authority, you're looking at a $50 million fine.
Wow.
And these are just basic rules of cybersecurity.
Interesting. Little different topic, but that's interesting.
Yeah, just something that I was working on this morning. So if anyone's interested to know more, please reach out to me.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts or comments, questions, observations before we convene today?
I have another question,
Feel free.
and actually kind of a couple, but we'll go with one. Being decentralized and in Hawaii, you have to prove your identity, right? Like to the app. You know, you're creating a decentralized identification, and you have to have documentation of your proof of life to give to, we'll say, the driver's license. You know, to get my driver's license, I need like a birth certificate and I need like a student ID. So when we load those documents into our decentralized Clear app and create our profile, how is that then stored in the system? Like, how do I keep a hold of that and not lose it?
The existing centralized assetation, it basically uses what's called a layering process. So one, it's going to verify your name, and then that goes through a verification process and a validation process. Two, it doesn't necessarily disclose your name. So if you use the app, let's say you create a business, your name doesn't get disclosed unless someone actually requests it, and then you can disclose it. So it's a trusting process where the individual that's created a decentralized identity can use a centralized ID or driver's license and verify who they are. So think about it as the opposite of what the existing centralized system does. And then it uses a process within Carry, the key receipt in architecture, that basically only allows information from that individual to be shared in a willing way, but it can be recovered and pulled back. So, and it's also based upon whichever jurisdiction as well. So, and it's based upon the zero knowledge proof in how the data is actually stored and how it can actually be synchronized across different departments or, environments, so to speak. So, for instance, let's say today there's a centralized system, and Hawaii is one of the worst in the world, not just in the US, but in the world, because they've got such a need for control because of the physical location to control the Pacific. But their systems and their culture and their judicial system and the leadership is so entrenched in literally control that they're very tight. So, their policing force, their DMV force, or how they actually go about residency, I'd say it's twice as strict as any other state within the United States of America, even though you'd think that there would be some consistencies or balances there. But the data all goes into a database. And when we talk about how the data is transferred, how it's stored, and then how it can be accessed, imagine a future, and it's actually defined in a couple of these documents. Let's see here. I'm actually going to jump back in here. It's defined in here where the data should only be accessed. Like, let's say someone gets pulled over and an officer wants to go and verify identity or do whatever they're going to do. There could actually be instead of accessing the full database, there could be a process where it just comes back to say, yes, that driver's license number is attached to the first name of the individual and a photo that can actually tie to it. And you can do this with a simple scan as well, but there's layers. I guess the point is does that officer need to know the address at where the individual lives? Do they need to know birth date? So a lot of people are like, no, from an identity standpoint, you need to know birth date, you need to know name, you need to know these different things that basically triangulate an individual. But it's really, how do we move from the existing centralized process into a decentralized process? And that's why some of the documents in here are actually documents on how government and law enforcement and technology can actually be defined. So, for instance, this is a law enforcement review. This goes through how data can be optimized and how it can actually tie particularly to the topics we're talking about. So you've got driver's license. How can you validate it? This ties exactly to what I was just talking about right here.
What CEDI gives officers: a faster, safer, privacy-preserving way to verify driver's license validity, vehicle registration, insurance status, court compliance, age or residency, tribal credentials, county credentials, all without database queries, personal data, or radio calls.
So they don't even need to jump in and go third party on it.
1. What the officer has: a handheld verifier app, phone, tablet, MDT, or in-car device, prelated with Utah DMV signed routes, court signed routes, insurance signed routes, county and tribal signed routes, revocation lists, ZKP circuit validators. Everything is stored locally, no network required. 2. What the resident shows: the resident opens the Utah Life app and presents either a QR code or a tap to prove NFC interaction.
So think about like a license plate. Here, I'll pull open, I'll grab one that'll give you an example. So think about a license plate like this, where an officer would basically scan it. And so it's not using the surveillance cameras, but an officer would scan it. And they could use almost any access device for it, but it would provide, is this vehicle registered? Is it insured? Is it financed? Is it stolen? All of the basic data points. But then it could also do the same type of thing that most of us do when we pick up a Lyft or a ride or an Uber, where we know the last digits of a license plate on a car, and we know the name of the person that we're supposed to connect with. That's the driver, or the driver knows the name of the recipient that's going to get the ride. So you basically are following that same structure, but there's using zero knowledge proof and the user actually owns their own identity. That's the difference. And that's really a good example that ties not only to registering a car or driving a car or getting a driver's license or a library card or any of the other literally 83 different permits, registrations, certificates, etc. But yeah, so I hope that that makes some level of sense. There's a lot more details to it, but you know, those details are what we're basically working through in one state that actually wants to free their citizens instead of enslaving their citizens. So,
And I don't know if you're aware of this, but for the 2024 election in Hawaii, our election is actually not certified, even though it's said to be certified. It's been contested, and they certified it 5 days before the cutoff date. So we've been at the Elections Commission, and people who are involved have been trying to get the receipts, and it's not being done. But my question is how would we go through and implement, and this kind of goes back to Mariano's, get them a way to certify the vote if we revoted? Is there a system in place where we could revote and have it verified?
yeah, the actual system that I showed you for Mexico was actually originally developed within the state of Hawaii or the kingdom of Hawaii, not the state of Hawaii. But the recognition of the voting systems tied to the political systems tied to the voters has to be aligned. And that's really what we're waiting for in that adoption curve. And that's what's starting to actually take place. But, you know, ultimately you have to have a body that actually can vote and everyone can see the vote, but they don't see who the individual is. And the individual can see that their vote actually counted. And when we accomplish those and say check and check, then I think that these types of voting systems will actually be realized. One of the big conversations that we had yesterday morning with some of these individuals that I met with was massively around voting. Like there's countries that are wanting these types of systems, but people like Michael Flynn is like, no, we have to go back to paper ballots. And I really love and respect Michael Flynn or General Flynn and the work that he's done over the years. And, you know, and I was even telling Patrick Byrne, voting can be done electronically, cryptographically, and that's the right way to do it. But there has to be such a massive level of trust and adoption that it can actually be realized. And the governments, like I was even walking out of one of the state buildings yesterday, and there's people out getting signatures that are basically trying to rechange the borders so that other things can happen. I won't go into the details of that, but the net is they're always going to have people that want to do one thing versus another. And in the end, transparency and honesty can actually bring the truth of any kind of democracy or republic or systems where the people all have a voice, but collectively at the individual standpoint. So, you know, I know there's a lot of topics and a lot of moving parts. We're well over time, but I'm grateful for all those that actually show up and actually are a part of the solution and continue to add value and continue in your own circles, in your own communities to say, hey, there's a different way. And it may be something that we need to learn about, but at least the conversation can get started. So any other thoughts or comments or anyone that would like to offer a closing prayer for us today while we wrap up? Anybody want to close us today? Okay, so tell you what, why don't we all give our own thanks over the next couple holidays? I should say it's not holidays, but over the next holiday, at least in America. I know in different parts of the world that are there, you know, let's take a couple days and give thanks and prayers and just be with our families and I know that most people on this call actually aren't in the US and they don't practice or live this Thanksgiving holiday, but maybe we learn about what it is and just give thanks in our own likes. So we'll go ahead and wrap up today, and we'll conclude without a prayer since no one wants to give it. And we'll just go into a couple days worth of Thanksgiving. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time and your attention and for all that you do and stand for. We'll see you next Tuesday. So much